Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all enjoying this Boston summer day. Today I have the great honor of introducing our Class Day speaker, Roberta Kaplan. Robbie obtained her JD from Columbia Law School in 1991, but she also graduated from Harvard College, so we can still claim her. Since then, she has gone on to be one of the most influential lawyers of her generation. In 2013, Robbie argued the case of her career so far, Windsor v. United States. Now, for those who don't know, Windsor challenged the misleadingly titled Defense of Marriage Act, which it was a 1996 bipartisan act of Congress that prohibited the federal recognition of same-sex marriages, even ones that had been recognized at the state level. Robbie's client, Edith Windsor, had been with her spouse, Thea, for 44 years. Edith cared for Thea as she had been incapacitated by multiple sclerosis. But the federal government would not recognize their marriage, so when Thea passed away, Edith was hit with a six-figure estate tax bill, a tax to which only gay married couples, not straight married couples, were subjected. Robbie took her case all the way to the Supreme Court and won. The impact was enormous. Our own Professor Lawrence Tribe said of Windsor, quote, "I can't think of any Supreme Court decision in history that has ever created so rapid and broad a lower court groundswell." Indeed, Windsor laid the groundwork for Obergefell v. Hodges, which legalized same-sex marriage nationwide just 2 years later. Robbie knew how much this victory meant to young queer people across the country, because she'd been there herself. In her book, Robbie describes the despair she felt when coming to grips with her sexuality. Quote, "For a newly out gay person in 1991, there was little reason to expect that a normal life was possible. The consequences seemed clear. Being gay meant losing the love and support of your family. It meant never being able to get married or start a family of your own. It meant living a covert life on the fringes of society, a life where none of the promises of a happy, secure adulthood applied." Now, for many people that remains true, but in my short lifetime, tremendous progress has been made, and that is thanks in no small part to Robbie Kaplan. But Robbie did not rest on her laurels after winning Windsor. She knew that the fight for civil rights and equal protection under the law was not over, that it's never over. So she doubled down. She left her partnership at a big law firm to start her own firm, Kaplan Hecker Fink. There, she has sued the Nazis who organized the right-wing riots in Charlottesville, Virginia. Successfully defended the LGBTQ Pride Parade in Starkville, Missouri, after the town government denied their permit. And is now helping challenge the Department of Commerce's discriminatory census citizenship question. She also co-founded the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund in 2018 to provide resources and support to women who have been sexually harassed at work, especially women who would otherwise face socioeconomic barriers to litigation. Through Time's Up, she has helped more than 4,000 survivors of workplace sexual harassment. Robbie is a trailblazer, so it's no surprise that her presence here marks a couple of major firsts. As Dean Minow told us nearly 3 years ago at Convocation, Robbie is addressing the first majority woman class in HLS history. Robbie is also the first out gay person to ever speak at Harvard Law School's Class Day. Given her tireless advocacy on behalf of women and queer people, we can think of no one better to mark this occasion. Now, there's one more thing I want to mention about DOMA, the discriminatory law that Robbie helped strike down. There were 16 Harvard Law School alums in the Congress that passed DOMA. 14 of those 16 alums voted in favor. That's right, 14 of the 16 HLS alums in Congress used their power to deny same-sex couples their right to equal protection under the law. We, the class of 2019, can do better. And Robbie is living proof. She shows us that we can and should use our law degrees to meaningfully improve people's lives. That's why we're thrilled to have her. So please welcome Robbie Kaplan.
The great Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, lived in what was then the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth from 1772 to 1810. As you can tell from those dates, he lived a very short life, and one filled with great sorrow. He had 6 children, 4 of whom died as infants, and he suffered what today would probably be diagnosed as clinical depression. Yet during his 38 years on this earth, he offered lessons on living a meaningful life, especially the duty to find joy, that I find to be especially helpful in these times. While it was customary at law school to quote famous lawyers or judges, wisdom can be found in many places. So today I would like to rely on Rabbi Nachman as a guide to the message I'd like to offer to you here today. Let me begin with one of his stories. Once upon a time, a king told the prime minister, "As an astrologer, I see that whoever eats any of the wheat that grows this year will go mad. Let us think of a solution." The prime minister answered, "Let us have some of last year's wheat set aside for us, so that we will not have to eat the tainted grain." The king replied, "But if we do that, we alone will be sane in an insane world. Then it will be as though we're the ones who are insane and the others are sane. Isn't it possible," the king added, "to set wheat aside for everyone? It's not possible to set aside wheat for everyone either, so we will have to eat the tainted wheat. But we shall make a mark on our foreheads, so that when we look at each other's foreheads, we will know that we are both insane." That story is one that I have been thinking about a lot of late, since I think it says something essential about the human condition. As soon-to-be graduates of Harvard Law School, let me assure you, like the king and his prime minister, we are all mad here. Me, you, your professors, the deans, the judges, we are all mad. We all have an invisible L word, no, not lesbians or lobbyists, but lawyers, inscribed on our foreheads. And that invisible L affects both our outlook and it twists our sense of humor. It allows us to see how the Constitution, how statutes, how the common law and regulations shape the lives of every American. Yes, we're insane, but at least we know it. Today, after 3 years of hard work, you're one of us. You can speak the secret language that lawyers use. So what are you supposed to do about that now? It would take an astonishing amount of chutzpah for me to tell you how to plot out the rest of your life. We all walk our own paths. there is only one thing that I know for sure, and that is that nobody really knows what life has in store for them. My late client, Edie Windsor, sure didn't. As a closeted young woman growing up in Philadelphia after World War II, she had no idea what the future held. She didn't know that she'd meet another woman by the name of Thea Spire and fall in love. She didn't know that Thea, as Zach mentioned, would ultimately become a quadriplegic from multiple sclerosis, and that after 40 years ago, they would fly to Canada to get married shortly before Thea's death. And she definitely didn't know that when the federal government refused to recognize their marriage, she'd win a landmark victory at the Supreme Court. Even after we filed our case, Edie was still surprised by her life's path. It's one thing to be out as a lesbian, she once remarked, but it's another thing entirely to be the out lesbian who just happens to be suing the United States of America. The same, of course, is true for me. As a closeted high school student in Cleveland, Ohio in the early 1980s, as a closeted college student here at Harvard in the mid-1980s, or as an only slightly less closeted law student at Columbia in the late 1980s, if you had told me that one day I would marry a woman, have a child, win a civil rights case about marriage equality, of all things, before the Supreme Court, and then start my own law firm, I would have responded to you that you were completely insane. But while there's a lot that you can't predict or control, there is plenty that you can. So I'd like to try to offer some advice based on my own 25 years as a lawyer, with a modest hope that it helps you along your own path. My first piece of advice is based on the most literal reading of Rabbi Nachman's story. In this crazy world, find people who also have that special mark on their foreheads and stick close to them. Even a king needs a prime minister, and both of them need allies. We tend to forget this in the legal profession. Too often we glamorize the lawyer as the lone advocate, standing heroically before the bar in the court. But that image is completely false. I could not have argued and won the Windsor case without an amazing team of lawyers by my side who grilled and I would say tortured me in moot courts, who agonized over every single word in our briefs, and who cried with me when we won. I wouldn't have been able to start my own law firm without the sanity, wisdom, and friendship of my current partners. And without so many other amazing women, we couldn't have founded the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which assists thousands of low-income survivors of sexual harassment and assault in the workplace, and which has enabled so many courageous women to be able to come forward and tell their stories. On that, I look to Oprah Winfrey, who has always put it best. As she said, when a new day finally dawns, it will be because a lot of magnificent women and some pretty phenomenal men fighting hard to make sure nobody ever has to say "me too" again. Now, in case it isn't already obvious to you, and you've already heard it here this afternoon, let me remind you that the greatest gift Harvard has given you is the students sitting around you here today. You will accomplish far more if you find other lawyers who share your values and you work with them to make things happen. If you come to realize that you're working with people who don't share your values or who can't help you grow as a lawyer, then be honest with yourself. They aren't the right colleagues. Find mentors who believe in you, and the people you choose to surround yourself with speaks volumes about who you are and who you will become. Rabbi Nachman once said that sometimes a group of people happily dancing together take hold of someone who is standing miserable and alone on the outside. They pull him into the dance despite himself, forcing him to rejoice with them. Especially when we feel stuck on the sidelines, friends and allies can help us to bring us back into the mix. Let yourself be the person who is pulled into the dance. And once you're there, especially if you come from communities that are not privileged, do the same for others. That brings me to the second piece of advice from Rabbi Nachman. If you believe that it is possible to break, believe that it is possible to repair. You guys have the distinction of graduating from law school at one of the most unsettled moments in our nation's history, as you heard Professor Lazarus say this afternoon. To borrow from the 1963 Ethel Merman Spencer Tracy movie that my son loved so much when he was little, it truly is a mad, 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 mad world. The past several years have seen a terrifying increase in hate crimes and bigotry toward minorities of all kinds. The Me Too movement has exposed the misogyny that infects so many of our leading institutions. Our elected officials struggle to address soaring income inequality, access to health care, an epidemic of gun violence, and the imminent threat of climate change. Whatever your politics or party, we can all agree that our society has become dangerously polarized and our politics profoundly divisive. The rule of law has taken a beating and has never looked more tenuous. Like Rabbi Nachman, we have good reason to be depressed. But it is far too easy to simply give up and become cynical, to decide that nothing really matters and there's nothing we can do to fix it. As lawyers, not to mention lawyers with Harvard law degrees, you have a duty to act. As Justice Kagan put it, citing, of course, Stan Lee's Spider-Man, in this world with great power, there also comes great responsibility. Seek opportunities to make the world better. And when you take on clients, whether a person, a corporation, or a government, devote yourself to solving their problems effectively and ethically. The life of a lawyer is a life of responsibility. A few weeks ago, I had the honor of acting as the MC, but not the cool rap kind, the nerdy lawyer kind, at a law day dinner in New York City. As I looked down from the podium in an enormous ballroom, I was struck by the fact that all those hundreds of lawyers in that room who surely strongly disagreed on matters of politics, law, or jurisprudence, after all, they were not only lawyers, but also New Yorkers, all shared the same belief about what it means to be a lawyer. As Second Circuit Judge Richard Sullivan noted that evening, all lawyers, not just government lawyers, not just public defenders, not just judges, all lawyers have an affirmative public duty to protect and defend our constitutional system of justice. That's not true of other professions, noble though they are. Doctors, accountants, architects, they don't take the oath that you will take. Lawyers alone are asked to assume this public role, and so it is that lawyers do not merely represent private clients in private matters. Lawyers have a public responsibility to serve the nation. This leads me to my third and final piece of advice. Be brave. As lawyers, we are temperamentally cautious, trained to see risk and to avoid it. Over these past 3 years, you may have seen and learned how legal reasoning at times can unduly complicate what is plainly right there in front of you. Lawyers are taught to switch deftly between both sides of an argument, to see every angle, and to define the right outcome for our clients based on a limited set of considerations. That's why it's sometimes said that lawyers are hired guns. But that doesn't have to be true, and in my experience, it usually isn't. But when principles don't align with professional, financial, or political incentives, it is far too easy for lawyers to over-rationalize core values into a hazy, meaningless blur. A Harvard law degree gives you the privilege to take risks that others cannot, to recover from mistakes that others cannot. Resist the impulse to play it safe. Think consciously about what you are doing and why you are doing it. If you just go with the flow and let others define what happens to you, then one day you will wake up and realize that the life you are living is not your own. This does not require you to abandon the prestigious institutions that many of you are heading to. I built a wonderful career by climbing the ranks at my old law firm of Paul Weiss. But becoming a great lawyer requires you to be courageous, to press boundaries wherever they exist, and to insist that things can always change for the better, especially now. If you have followed my first two pieces of advice, then you will know when the moment demands bravery, and you will have the support you need to act. Truth be told, it was scary to take a marriage equality case to the Supreme Court and feel the fate of so many Americans resting on my shoulders. It was scary to start a new law firm and to decide that our very first case would be a lawsuit against a dozen Nazis who had planned the attack in Charlottesville. In making that decision, my colleagues and I not only felt an immense responsibility to our clients, but also for each other's physical safety and security. But I knew that I would be with people who would have my back no matter what. Your life will not always be easy. There will be times when you want to throw up your hands in frustration. Believe me, I've had those fair share of feelings. I know I sound like an old lady when I say this, but if you think that sexism is a big problem in the legal profession today, just imagine what it was like when I graduated law school in 1991. Not to mention the fact that, as you heard from Zachary, I remained in the closet through both of my clerkships due to my own fear of widespread homophobia. When you wake up tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, persist. As members of the bar, you will be entrusted with the responsibility to protect the Constitution of the United States of America. The people who stand the most to lose from the battles raging around us today do not have the privilege to be sitting at this ceremony. They need your help now more than ever. Rabbi Nachman taught his followers that all the world is a very narrow bridge, and that the main thing to remember is not to fear at all. Those words are as true today as they were during Rabbi Nachman's time of pogroms and plagues. So like Edie Windsor, be brave. Be yourself and be true to yourself. As my dear friend and Windsor co-counsel Pam Carlin has said, you cannot choreograph a lifetime. Even if you lose a case or two or three along the way, as I did, keep on walking across that narrow bridge with as little fear as possible. You are about to enter the noblest of professions. Take on clients and causes because you know in your head and in your heart that it's the right thing to do. As far as I can tell, that's what this crazy condition of being both a human being and a lawyer is all about. And I guess I really am an old lady when I say this. We are counting on you to do so. Thank you, Dean Manning. Thank you, Dean of Student Cells. Thank you to the association and President Eaton. Congratulations to the thousands of friends and family members who came from all over the country to be here with you today. And most of all, thank you to the Harvard class of 2019 for inviting me to be a part of your joyous celebration.